And we begin this edition with the latest on Russia-Ukraine peace talks. It's the United States that has hailed progress that was made during Ukraine peace plan in Geneva. A joint statement that's been released by the US and Ukraine has unveiled an updated peace framework that upholds Ukraine's sovereignty. Now, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio led the American delegation in Geneva on Sunday, meeting with Ukrainian and European officials to discuss a cessation of hostilities that began with Russia's invasion in February 2022. In fact, the framework revised a previous 28-point plan that had required Ukraine to cede territory, reduce its armed forces, and renounce NATO ambition. These were terms that Kiev had rejected and sought changes to. Now, striking an optimistic chord, Rubio said that the US was making changes to the peace plan based on Ukraine's suggestions so as to come to an agreement.
We arrived here today with one goal, and the goal was to take, is 28 points or 26 points, depending on which version as it continued to evolve, and try to narrow the ones that were open items. And we have achieved that today in a very substantial way. So I feel very optimistic that we're going to get there in a very reasonable period of time very soon. Our goal is to end this war as soon as possible, but we need a little more time.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the talks with US in Switzerland to achieve peace in Ukraine were substantive and that US President's team is hearing Ukraine's concerns.
The delegation has just reported on the results of their discussions, and these were substantive conversations. A lot is changing. We are working very carefully on the steps needed to end the war. It is important that there is dialogue with the American representatives, and there are signals President Trump's team is hearing us.
According to reports, US and Ukrainian officials also discussed a potential visit by the Ukrainian president to Washington, and that is to meet Trump as early as this week, following the Geneva talks. Reports even suggest that the trip, which is yet to be confirmed, would focus on the most sensitive parts of the plan, especially territorial issues. In fact, on the war front, Russian forces staged a massive drone attack on Sunday, that is on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Also, a video that was released showed emergency services working to extinguish flames and recover bodies in the aftermath of the attack. In fact, according to the mayor, at least 4 people were killed in these strikes, while 17 others sustained injuries. 15 strikes were recorded in 6 areas of the city in northeastern Ukraine. Also, the governor of Dnipropetrovsk region further south said that 2 people were killed in a Russian strike on the town of Marhanets. And joining us to discuss the latest on the peace plan that's been proposed, we are being joined by John Blaxland. He's an international security expert and professor of international security as well as intelligence studies at the Strategic and Defense Studies. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Your first thoughts on the peace plan that's been proposed. Do you think the pain points, the sticking points that were earlier proposed by the Ukrainian sides have now essentially been addressed in the revised plan that's been presented?
So thanks for having me on the program. It is actually really hard to keep track of the head-spinning changes between positions that are presented from day to day. We had a 28-point plan that only a few hours ago involved Ukraine giving up a significant portion of its territory, a critical terrain to the defense of Ukraine that the Russians have been coveting for the last few years and fighting, losing tens of thousands of soldiers in their attempt to seize it from Ukraine. So exactly where we end up it's hard to say, because while Secretary of State Rubio is acting in good faith in trying to get a negotiated position, there's a lot of going toing and froing here. The plan, the 28-point plan, from my understanding, was one that was drafted very much with Steve Witkoff and the Russian delegation playing a prominent role. Whatever has come out of this meeting with Rubio now has to go back to the Russians. And of course, if it doesn't quite meet their key needs, it's not likely to get ahead. get endorsed. It's very interesting the dynamics at play here, though, because what seems to be is that the US president really wants a deal. He wants to strike a deal that is going to give him an opportunity to do more with Russia. And the 28-point plan talked about a lot of the deals where he wants to do investments and on rare earths and AI and other things with Russia that seem to be about cleaving Russia off China. Now that's been poo-pooed as a pretty simplistic kind of plan, but it does seem to pervade a lot of the thinking that's coming out of Washington these days. This idea that you can cut a deal, make enough concessions to Russia, and maybe throw Ukraine under the bus a little bit to get this deal that's going to be this grand bargain. And of course, the devil's in the details, and we're seeing that right now. While this negotiation seems to be going well at the moment, who knows what the next 24 hours will bring.
Yes, Mr. Blaxland, what do you have to say about the advances being made by the Russian side on the war front? Do you think that now Ukraine is obligated to accept the changes that have been proposed, one? And also with reference to the supply of Tomahawk missiles, given all of that is yet to be given to Ukraine, do you think the latter is now obligated to accept the changes that have been proposed by Trump in the peace plan?
Yeah, look, it's certainly a lot harder for Ukraine to go against America's wishes. They've been very effective at generating their own capabilities, their own missiles. So even though they haven't got the Tomahawks from the United States, they've got indigenous weapon systems that are pretty effective, but they're still reliant on American technology, particularly American intelligence. But in the area of the front line, particularly around Pokrovsk, where the Russians have been incrementally coming around and enveloping the Ukrainian positions in Pokrovsk, they've done so at an incredible loss of life. The cost has been enormous for Russia. And of course, the risk is that it's going to be significant further for Ukraine as well, particularly if that Pokrovsk pocket is closed off. And that does look like it's not far off, really, and now with the momentum being incrementally on the Russian side. So the question then is, okay, if you lose Pokrovsk, what else do you lose in the Donetsk? And of course, Russia's maximalist plans are to take all of the Donetsk, which is the major fortified part of Ukraine.
Yes, Mr. Alexander, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Point taken, remains to be seen what essentially comes out of the peace plan and whether we altogether see that cessation of hostilities or not. Thank you for speaking to WION.
Good to be with you.